French Shalom and greetings to you all. Now, we just finished the 12 days that set your year. But if you need to change them, go ahead and do it. And know that the prayers that we do at any time that we pray are to both give thanks and to engage our totality in sensual experience, as deep as our core being, so that we can be part of the joy of unity, because we are all one. We're all part of one greater whole. Now, for the last 3,300 years or so, our wonderful community has come together wherever we are to celebrate love, happiness, freedom. Even though we set days in the year devoted to certain things, we still gather every week as we come together as a community. A like-minded, like-souled unification of spirit, the collective consciousness of seekers who come together and are showing a faith of love, a community, a chavura, fellowship, expressing our nature of kindness, compassion, thoughts, feelings, hopes, dreams, and wishes that unites us all in this community house of spirit, the Beth Ruach. So once again, my friends, please do go ahead and invite everybody you know, physically, psychically, emotionally, or spiritually, to gather and share. From Psalm 133, the Hine Matov, come together. Hine Matov. Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov. How good and how pleasant it is for brothers and sisters together. Community, together. Because it's as a community together, my friend, that we all spread love, goodwill, and fellowship to the world. Remember, friends, this is your sending out just that little bit of goodwill that we all generate out to the universe, because it will find the people who need it and do the most good. And let's not forget, this time of the year, dedicated to freedom, is also a time of healing and renewal. So let's send some renewal energy out to everybody. For Monica, for Sue, for Martin, for Maria, for Devora, as always. It is the kindness, healing, wishes, goodwill, and love that we all send out. It circles the world, finding those in need. So thank you, each of you, for all you do, for all you care, because the world is a world of spirit, and spirit, my friends, never dies. Me, may the source of strength bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage, make our lives a blessing. The renewal of body, the renewal of spirit. Let us sing. Amen. Misha Baruch, let us all have our spirits renewed, my friends. This is the great prayer for healing, in which we call upon God to heal as He has healed before. Misha Baruch, may He who blessed, because healing is a blessing. So let's all heal as we bring in this new year with freedom from whatever fears you have. Now, if ever there was a time, Passover is the time for the engagement of your senses. We eat, drink, and be merry, but we can ensure we engage our totality. Engage all of your senses, my friends. Light a candle for sight. Listen to the story. Sing the songs for sound. Eat the food. Drink the wine for taste. Grab some spring flowers on your way in to visit your friends, and engage your olfactory sense. And then wash your hands and feel the touch of water as it cleanses you. Now, the biblical account of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt is obviously one of the most popular narratives from the ancient world. It has often been said it is the theme of the Jewish festival of Passover, Pesach, which refers to God's instructions to the Israelites to mark their doors with the blood of a slaughtered lamb so that the Lord would pass over them on His way to kill Egypt's firstborn. It's not a bad summary, but you can also summarize the holiday as the ritual of protection from death, the overcoming of bitterness, anger, and sadness in life, and joining the ranks of the holy. And that may be a little bit more personal. On top of that, you also get to face and understand your fear. And that's what this holiday is really about. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, you all know what a Seder is. And Seder is simply a word that means order. but it's taken on a greater meaning, like bread has taken on the meaning of all of food. So when you say bread, you really mean food. And there's 15 steps in the order of the Seder of the evening, during which you traditionally have 4 cups of wine, vegetables that you dip in salt water, the flat, dry cracker-like bread known as matzah, but which really has amazing properties. Bitter herbs. Usually we use horseradish for it. Charoset, concoction of nuts, apples, and wine. We undergo rituals, like dipping lettuce in salt water and making these strange sandwiches. We recite the plagues. We search for a hidden piece of matzah. We ask 4 questions and recite the story in the Haggadah and talk of 4 different types of children and 4 different martyred rabbis, none of which have anything to do with the Exodus story. And then, of course, there is eating a festive meal. Now, each of these are part of this 15-step dance that combines sight, sound, smells, taste, the sensations of our lives in an evening dedicated to sensuality and to talk and to learning and to share and to inspire. So go and enjoy your Seders. But I want you to keep a few things in mind when you do. On this holiday, we read a book called the Haggadah. And the opening of every Haggadah story is, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Now, Haggadah is a word that means to tell. And it comes from Exodus 13:8, V'Haggadah l'diber b'yom hahu. And you shall tell your son. It is not a story to be read. It is a story to be told. Okay, in the words of the Talmud, in every generation, a person is obligated to view themselves as if they personally left Egypt. And in the Haggadah itself, it says, even if we were all wise, all men of understanding, all elders, all knowledgeable of the Torah, it would be incumbent upon us to speak of the Exodus from Egypt, to speak of freedom from constraint. Because that's what we're really looking for, is freedom from constraint. Now, the prayers that are said during the holiday refer to Passover as Zamein Charutenu, the time of our freedom. Not the time of their freedom, but our freedom. It's your freedom, my friends. Make it current, make it personal. It's about you and what you need to be free. Do not make this an evening of reading. This is an evening of storytelling, and it's an evening of questions. Now, you may not get all the answers, but questions are certainly welcome. And many of you are familiar with the famous 4 questions. The Ma Nishtana, why is this night? Ma Nishtana. What is so different? Halayla hazeh. On this night, Mikol Halaylot, from all other nights. Manishtana Halayla hazeh, Mikol Halaylot, Halayla hazeh. Why is this night so different from all other nights? Well, remember, this was the most important holy day in the Torah. This is the time to set yourself free, especially from your ego. Freedom is your ability to be you. So give some thought to a 3-part question, not generally thought to be one of the famous 4, but which I think is really worth asking yourself. Who are you? Who do you want to be? What is stopping you? I want you to think about that, not just for now, but for always, because in there will be the fear that holds you back. So, and that's your Pharaoh. So please remember, it is the other story of Exodus, the story of individual freedom, that you should be telling at your Seders. And the instructions are laid out so beautifully in Exodus 12:5 and from 12:18 to 26, where we're introduced to the sacrifice with the lamb. And all the community, the congregation of Israel, will slaughter it between the 2 evenings, and they will take hyssop and some of the blood and place it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel on the houses in which they will eat it. And they will eat the meat in this night. They will eat it fire roasted and with unleavened bread on bitter herbs. And you shall eat it like this: your hips clothed, your shoes on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover, Pesach Hu Adonai. And I shall pass through the land of Egypt in this night, and I shall strike every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from human to animal, and I shall make judgments on the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord, And the blood will be as a sign for you on the houses in which you are, and I shall see the blood, and I shall halt at you. And there won't be a plague among you as a destroyer when I strike in the land of Egypt. And this day will become a commemoration for you. You shall celebrate it, a festival to the Lord. You shall celebrate it through your generations, an eternal law. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and you shall observe the unleavened bread, because in this very day I brought out your masses from the land of Egypt, and you shall observe this day through your generations, an eternal law. Well, there you have it, my friend. You have the actual menu and the instructions. Lamb, bitter herbs, unleavened bread. That's the food. Hyssop and blood to put the blood on the doorposts. Eat quickly. Be ready to go. That's it. That is all the Torah tells you about this holiday. And this holiday is not called Passover. It is called the Festival of Unleavened Bread, Matzah. So how are we going to change the event, to bring it home, to make it personal, to take it back to what it's supposed to be about? Well, try not reading from your regular Haggadah. Make this evening a haggah. Do not read. Tell the story. Our sages tell us we are to tell the story as if we were being freed from Egypt. And we all are. We all have been. We all have constraints, restrictions, pharaohs in our lives, the fears which drain and steal our love of life. Tell your story and inspire those around you. Friends, it's not an evening dedicated to age, it's dedicated to experience. Any who have overcome fear and constraint must lead the others, must help others to see the path of freedom. We do it with food. We do it with questions. Now, here are the questions that you know. On all of the nights, we do not dip even once. On this night, why do we dip twice? And of course, the twice is once we dip karpas, the green vegetable, in salt water, and once we dip bitter herbs in harosa to sweeten them, and we do that with the sandwich. On all of the nights, we eat either bread or matzah, but on this night, why only matzah? On all of the nights, we eat herbs of any kind, but on this night, why only bitter herbs? And the fourth question, and it doesn't belong, on all of the nights we eat our meals in any manner. On this night, why do we sit around the table in a reclining position? And like I say, outside of the fourth question, these all relate to the paragraph of instructions from Exodus, which we read, the ones that actually give the instructions for the evening. And there are actually older records, which show the original Manishtana, why is this night, to have included only 3 questions, not 4. On all of the nights, we do not dip herbs in any condiment. On this night, we dip them twice. On all of the nights, we eat bread matzah. On this night, only matzah. On all of the nights, we eat all kinds of herbs, but on this night, only bitter herbs. And there were even some records where the first question, the one about dipping herbs, was not asked. In its place was a question about eating lamb, fire roasted. Okay, and that is even an older one. So these 3 questions correspond even more to the instructions given, and they correspond to the 3 main foods that are to be eaten at the Seder, 3 that we spoke of, and which represent the entire reason for this holy day of freedom. The lamb. It represents the ritual of protection from death. Abraham's sacrifice of the ram in place of Isaac, and the sacrifice we make as a family to commence this evening, to take the blood and mark our homes for protection. The bitter herbs represents the overcoming of bitterness, anger, sadness in life. We all encounter them. The bitter herbs, we all have some bitter at times. And in eating the bitter, it becomes sweet. We overcome it, we grow, we move forward. And the unleavened bread, it represents our joining the ranks of the holy. Matzah, the egoless bread, does not rise. The reminder to put our egos away. And as holy people, we get to share the bread of the priest, because the matzah was the bread of the priest. Now, this is all you need to think of to honor and celebrate what this holiday represents and why it's so important. You don't need to read that other book. This is all contained right there, and this is the entire story. But you can actually do it, if you don't want to do it with the story from Exodus, you do it instead with the symbols you grew up with. Put down the books and tell the story by looking at your existing Seder plate, because the entire history is right there. Now, if we use the modern, and when I say modern, I really mean Second Temple, because that's where the Seder plate we use comes from Second Temple times. We could still tell the story, because the entire story is contained in the Seder plate. Everything on it symbolizes a different aspect of Exodus. Zroa, the roasted shank bone of the lamb, well, it was the dominant sacrificial animal of the Torah. It reminds us of Abraham's sacrifice, or should I say near sacrifice, of our origins, of shepherding, the career choice of the patriarchs and of Moses. Rashi, the great commentator, viewed shepherding as the career choice of the intellectual. I could take that. It took little effort and allowed plenty of time to think. That sounds pretty good to me. It evokes the Paschal lamb, which our forefathers offered to God and ate as the meal, and which we eat on this night as our sacrifice, our exchange. Beitza, the boiled egg, whose roundness symbolizes the circle of life and death, the universal symbol from just about every society, my friends, the world egg, the cosmic egg, as we see in so many cultures. The primordial being comes into existence through hatching from the egg, such as Ra, to the Egyptians, or rising from the primordial waters of earth like the Greek Omphalos, the egg-shaped navel of the earth, as honored at Delphi. Carpus, the green vegetable, usually parsley, but if you have hyssop, use it. It's the first fruit of the season, and we dip it in salt water to remind us of our tears and of the brushing of the lintels and the doorposts. Maror, bitter herb to remind us of the bitterness of Egyptian bondage and slavery, but it really signifies the bitterness of any confining situation when we feel overwhelmed. Now, on a deeper note, the maror, or bitter herbs, reminds us of the Egyptian slavery, which is really a reminder that the name for Egypt in biblical times was Mitzrayim, the root of which is Mem Tzadi Resh, Meitzir, which means to limit, to bind, to restrict. And that's why Egypt is a place of restriction and constraint, the things we do to ourselves, to imprison ourselves in fear. And we eat the maror not just to remind us of the bitter past, but because we can survive bitterness. And from it comes the taste of freedom, life. We are survivors, my friends. And please take a moment during your evening to remember and to honor the victims of, as well as the survivors, and there's less of them all the time, of the Holocaust. There is a danger in forgetting and distancing ourselves too much. Their story of freedom is our story of freedom. It must stand as a shining example of the indomitable spirit of man. Fifth item is the haroseth, that magical mixture of fruit and nuts that reminds us of the mortar which we used in making the pyramids. It's a mystical formula comprised of the 3 roots and 7 fruits from the trees of the Garden of Eden, representing the tree of life. And as such, it represents the mortar that holds the universe together. And my friends, that mortar, of course, is love. The last item is the matzah, the bread of affliction and hurry, which did not rise because we left so quickly. But for those who know a little Hebrew, the root for command, good deed, and unleavened bread is the same root word. In one case it is mitzvah, and in the other it is matzah. And rather than see the matzah, the unleavened bread, as a bread of affliction, see it as the bread of holiness, and the priest allows us to be priest-like for 7 days. It is unleavened, it does not rise, it is the bread without ego, which is the leavening agent of man. Now, most of the book you read actually has very little from the Exodus. In fact, Moses isn't even mentioned. But the part of the story that sticks the closest to Exodus is, of course, the reciting of the plagues. Now, for many, it's a favorite part of the evening. People love dipping their knives or fingers in the wine and splashing it on the plate as we recite the plagues to remind us both how our people and the Egyptians suffered, because everybody suffered with them. The plagues, my friend, represent more than just the inconveniences of life or punishments. They weren't given as punishments, actually. The 10 plagues counter creation. They reflect the tree of life and the 10 commandments, and they are cosmic in scope, and they still affect us in our lives to this day. And on this night of questions, we have to ask ourselves whether these plagues may still be plaguing our lives by events that happen to us, by things we do to others, things we do to ourselves. This evening of questions, ask yourself, have you fought plagues? Have you brought plagues? The answer to both is probably yes. Let's review the plagues of Egypt. Makot, Mitzrayim, And for each plague, for those of you who have it handy, put a drop of wine on your plate or do so in the recesses of your mind. First was blood, dam, the life force of man, the one true forbidden food. His ki, his soul, his nefesh, his ruach flows through blood. Has my lifeblood been cut off? Has my energetic love of life experience been curtailed? Have I cut off in others? Frogs, tzfardea. We all know that when you touch a frog, you get a wart. What are the warts in my life? Lice, keenum, vermin. You know what? They may not kill you, but they are bloodsuckers. Are there bloodsuckers in your life? Where are you being a bloodsucker in others? Beasts, a rove, swarming creatures, often mistaken for a plague of wild animals, and it's really the lousiest of the translations. But it's really about gnats and other swarming things that interfere with the life. In fact, this is one of the most dangerous plagues of all. In several instances in the Torah, we are told of the danger of swarming creatures. That is the warning of the mob mentality. Are you part of a mob? Are you the target of a mob? Pestilence, deve, infectious disease, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, true harbinger of death, and a term that makes one cringe, like leprosy. It has social implications, and if you have it, you're an outcast. Are you an outcast in life, my friends? Do you cast out others? Boils, shechin, another disease, but one that is visible. You see it on people. Visible differences incubates discrimination. Do you discriminate? Are you discriminated against? Hail, barad, hard balls of ice and snow. That doesn't sound so bad. After all, it's water, the birth of life, but it's a destroyer of crops, so it means there is no food. It's unpredictable, and it brings devastation. This was burning hail, fire and water. We have two opposites which fight each other. Well, has hail held you back? Have you devastated another's life? Are you battling yourself? Locusts, arabe, another swarming creature, 2 of them in 10 plagues. Now that tells you something. It tells you how dangerous swarming things are. The great danger of the swarming mass. And locusts, my friends, contribute nothing. They're the worst kind of natural disaster. And there's some communities that are considered locusts because they feed off of what others produce and produce nothing of their own. They only bring devastation. Do you contribute and produce? Do you feed off others? Are there parasites in your life? Darkness, choshech. Now this is probably, I think, the most prevalent plague of all. How many of us still live in darkness? Do you fear the light because it hurts your eyes? What can we each do to help bring more light to the world? Well, we have to start by bringing it into our own lives. And finally, we had the death of the firstborn. Makat, becharot. Death takes many forms, my friends. We all know people whose spirit has died. They go through the motions of life only. Sometimes it's because of hardships. Sometimes it's because their own spirits have been crushed, ridiculed, scorned. Where have I crushed another? Where have I been crushed? Where have I been encouraging? Where have I been encouraged? These are the plagues that we each face every day of our lives, and we can each do something about every one of them. We can ensure they're not part of our lives anymore. And as you each celebrate this great gift of mankind, this gift of individual freedom, I want you to also do the following. You've already engaged your senses, and that is your connection to God. But do these because it'll allow you to get closer to God. Ask God to be revealed. Literally just ask, God, please reveal yourself to me. If necessary, imagine you're in a dark room with a dimmer switch. In this room, it's hard to make out what's in front of us. We know something's there. So we ask God to gradually increase the light. God, help me see what's in the room with me. Help me see the people and things in the world before me. Help me see you better. Imagine the light in the room getting brighter and brighter so that we can see. Cultivate gratitude, my friends. Give thanks for the day. Give thanks for the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the homes that provide us shelter, the people who share their love with us. Give thanks for our families and friends. Try to be thankful for all the people we meet during the day. Everyone from the security guard in the office building to the tired waitress in desperate need of a break. Give thanks to God for the person who drove slowly earlier in the day when you're running late, because maybe that person was God's way of slowing you down to protect you. Pay attention to your emotions. Sometimes our heads can get in the way of our hearts. Many of us have minds that never stop jumping from one thing to another, but it's important to pay attention to our emotions, especially if we experience blockages. Now, the great philosopher Ignatius believed that our emotions are able to carry us closer to God when they are free-flowing, just as they can stall us when there are barriers. What is God saying to us in the feelings we have about the day, the angry, anxious, depressed, or hopeful and happy feelings that we experience at work, at home? Ask God to help untangle these experiences, help us understand how we feel. Choose something great that happened and think about it. Maybe you had a great conversation with a friend. Explore what made you feel good. Was it just laughs? Did you learn something? Pray for that friend. Take that experience into your heart and ponder it. Ask, where was God for me today? Was God present in your actions? We're asked to seek God in all things, so the question becomes whether we see God in our work, in the less fortunate, in the friend going through bad times. If we're angry at our brother or sister, we know that we are angry at God. We are called to forgive. And if we are struggling to do so, then we can ask God for help. And it is not just for one day of the year. And friends, bless tomorrow. We ask God to help guide us on this journey we call life. Though this might seem almost rote or silly, asking God for directions is an important part of our lives. From time to time, all of us need to stop for directions. Never be afraid to ask God to point you where you need to go. Then be still. Listen to the voice. Trust that God is guiding you in everything you're doing. Remember, you are now free from all the fears that you have carried. The Passover celebration commemorates an event which will probably symbolize for all time the essential meaning of freedom, namely freedom directed to a purpose. When Israel came forth from bondage, it was not simply to enjoy liberty, but to make liberty an instrument of service. Are you, my friends, offering yourself in the service of others? These are the stories of freedom that you should be telling. Your story is the story of freedom that you should be telling. This is my right given by God to live a free life, to live in freedom, talking about freedom, talking about freedom. I will fight for the right to live in freedom, and anyone tries to take it away will have to answer, 'cause this is my right. This is my right, a right given by God to live a free life, to live in freedom, talking about freedom, talking about freedom. I will fight for the right to live in freedom. And that's what you need to do, my friends. It is your right. Go claim your freedom, each of you. Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful Passover and blessings to you all. I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.